it's Reija and welcome to another video. Today I'm gonna be doing this week's Booktube SFF Awards Babbles. This week's topic is tips for beginner SFF readers, and I'll be sharing with you some of my tips for beginner readers of science fiction and fantasy, and I'll be focusing mostly on the fantasy part because that's what I read most of the time. So let's get started. So my first tip is to start reading standalones. Many a time when newcomers come into the genre, they often think about fantasy as this huge hulking series like A Song of Ice and Fire and Patrick Rothfuss's Kingkiller Chronicles and A Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. And that's not at all that fantasy has to offer. There are a lot of standalones and a lot of series that have first books that work as standalones. So I would recommend starting with some of those and also some shorter fiction. For example, the 10 Soret novellas by J.I. Young, Sorcerer to the Crown by Zen Cho, which is a perfectly passable standalone even though there is a sequel coming, and Rivers of London by Ben Aronovich if you want a more accessible book with only a hint of fantasy in it. And that is a perfectly good bridge to my next tip, which is to read magical realism and low fantasy. So start with books that have only a certain element of fantasy in them. For example, magical realism with, for example, witches, but which is set in the real world, or maybe a fantasy world that has no magic in it, etc. So you have a kind of familiarity with the setting and you're not kind of overexposing yourself to too many fantastical aspects at one time, if that's not something that you're used to. So once you've read a few standalones, once you've read some low fantasy, some magical realism, also Fantasy of Manners, Swords Point by Ellen Kushner, is a very good starting point, then I would suggest kind of growing into trilogies next. Because those are, in my opinion, a very easy way to start kind of broadening your fantasy reading into bigger series, because trilogies are self-contained, they are only that 1 3-book series and they tell a very kind of set story that doesn't usually broaden out into this huge sprawling worlds filled with various other companion novels and sequels and whatnot. For that I would recommend the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. That's also a very good bridge if you are a fantasy reader and want to kind of broaden your horizons into science fiction, because it kind of deals with both genres, and I think it's a very good bridging, genre bridging book series. So those are pretty much all the tips I want to share with you. Standalones, magical realism, low fantasy, Fantasy of Manners, and finally broaden your horizons into trilogies and bigger series from there. That's pretty much how I got into fantasy. I did not really have any kind of guidelines as to what I wanted to read. I just picked covers that interested me. If there was a cover with a really action-oriented scene or some amazing MacGuffin in it that interested me, I would pick that up and read it. And this is how I read a lot of David Eddings. But there you have it. This has been my Babbles video for tips for new fantasy readers, and I will see you in another video very soon. Bye bye!